Hello, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. I do want to let you know that today's presentation is being recorded. Just for your knowledge, it is being recorded. And as I said, we'll get started here in just a few minutes. We still got about a minute before the hour. We'll give people just another couple minutes to join us. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. Just going to give people another minute or two to join us, and then we will get started. I also do want to let you know that this presentation is being recorded as well. Again, good morning, everyone. Give us just about another minute and we'll get this show kicked off. Again, we appreciate everyone's time today during this busy time of the year. And thank you for your patience as we get ready to get started. And just a reminder, we are recording this presentation. So just for your knowledge, we are recording as well. Okay, Chelsea, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Sounds great.
Okay. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. I see a lot of familiar, names and some pictures in the gallery here of participants. So appreciate you all joining us today. Happy holiday season to everyone, and appreciate your time during this busy time of the year. For those of you that don't know, my name is Mike Walker. I am the president of the Voluntary Benefits Shop. We do a series of webinars, throughout the year to, educate, our broker partners and sometimes their clients on things that are going on in the world of, benefits and voluntary benefits. Today specifically, we're going to be, talking a little bit about life with long-term care in general, status of legislation, state legislation with payroll taxes for long-term care. So we're going to go pretty quick today, just to breeze through the topics. And with that, I'm going to get started. So start off just with a little bit of background. Again, my name is Mike Walker, president of the Voluntary Benefits Shop. We work with brokers such as yourself in terms of and consultants with bringing the best in these life with long-term care products to their clients. If you need to reach out to us for any reason, here's my contact information. You have my email, my phone number, and our website. So feel free to, take that down, and I'll pull it up again at the end. So, okay, a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody's muted. We may unmute at the end, depending on the number of participants, but you can submit all questions via chat. So, please feel free if you have questions to enter them via chat, and we will, check chat periodically to answer questions. And again, at the end of presentation, we'll also answer questions. And again, I just want to make sure that everyone does understand that this presentation is being recorded. Okay, so topics today. We're going to talk about why, clients need to really consider long-term care as an employee benefit. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Going to talk about the current state of legislation across the country. And then we're going to talk about how the life with long-term care hybrid products work in general, not specifically any specific product structure, but just, very general in terms of that. So long-term care, let's talk about why it's so needed as an employee benefit. So number one, in my opinion, this is the most underserved financial need that America as a population has. Um, it's something that impacts a really large part of the population. You can see here, 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will need some shape, form, or fashion of long-term care services. 20% of people will actually need that care for longer than 5 years. So this impacts a really large part of the population. And it's an expensive proposition. On your screen here, you can see a snapshot of costs. This is, average throughout the country, $55,000 median annual cost for in-home health care, $95,000 the annual cost of care in a nursing home, $108,000 is the annual cost of care for a private room in a nursing home. The estimated cost of care for the final 5 years of someone's life for a person with dementia is $367,000. So, this is a big expense for really, the majority of our population in this country. And you can extrapolate it out. It doesn't take long until when someone incurs this type of cost for it to really impact their, family financial security, and their ability to make choices based upon, finances, et cetera, and things of that nature. And so that's problematic because so few people have really taken steps to prepare. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, Here's a couple of surprising stats. So the average monthly Social Security check for retirees is just a little under $1,700, and the average American has $255,000 in retirement savings, right? So that's, if you look at the cost that we just talked about, it doesn't take long for that retirement savings to be evaporated when someone goes through an LTC situation, which certainly makes things difficult from a financial perspective for the family, and also, a spouse that have to be prepared to live many years after the inflicted spouse, passes away. And so it can be a big problem. The other problem out there is that, people are really misinformed on how long-term care, can be provided for until they go through it or until a family member goes through it. Most people are very misinformed. A lot of people think that either the health insurance or the Affordable Care Act covers long-term care. I mean, we all know it doesn't, but I guarantee a lot of your employee clients don't understand that that's not covered by health insurance, and the Affordable Care Act did nothing for that. Um, People think that maybe Medicare is the way that they're going to prepare for it, but Medicare, may pay for care in a nursing home, but it's only for a maximum of 100 days. So that's not really long-term care. That's only short-term care. And, and again, I said may pay because it's only in certain circumstances. And then, sometimes people, rely on Medicaid. And the reality is that, Medicaid, yes, it can pay for nursing home care, but it's really only if someone's exhausted the majority of their savings and assets. Um, I was reading some stuff on this, just recently, and depending on the state, people can really have to be down to as little as just over $2,000 in savings and assets outside of the home, before Medicaid can kick in, and even then, it has to be a facility that accepts Medicaid, right? And so it really limits your care options and can really cause a family to exhaust assets. Here's a couple of other stats I ran across recently. Transamerica recently put out a report called Transamerica's Extended Care Report. Are we ready for long-term care needs? And 91% of people that were surveyed knew that they should be planning for the possibility of needing long-term care. So that's a high number. But of those, only 45% actually had thought about planning for their needs. And again, that doesn't mean they did plan. That means they just thought about planning for those needs. So the most surprising stats probably at the bottom of this. Right now, fewer than 1 in 30 Americans owns long-term care insurance, and only 7% of adults over the age of 50, right? So think about that gap. 70% of people are going to need some shape, form, or fashion of services, and only 7% of adults over the age of 50 have long-term care insurance. So that's a big gap. Most of us aren't prepared. Most of our clients at the employee level aren't prepared. And A big thing for them is about educating them about why, long-term care insurance, can help them, right? And I think most of us probably know this, but it's about protecting the family, about protecting assets, protecting retirement savings, protecting other assets. A big thing is to enable people to stay in their own home longer. I feel like, most of us feel like if we go through this type of situation, we want to be able to receive care in our own home. Um, and we'd like to be able to stay there as long as possible. Well, that's one thing that long-term care insurance and life with long-term care hybrid products enable people to do, is be able to make that decision to be able to stay in their own home longer and in a way that's comfortable for the family. And this lastly, really just to be able to maintain that financial independence and not be dependent on a loved one for either finances or care, right? And so there's a lot of reasons to buy it, but it's up to us, as advisors, to educate, our clients, our employee clients, and then, or our employer clients, and then their employees about why it makes sense. And then I think, most of us on this call know this, but it used to be that there was a lot of options for long-term care, right? On the direct basis, or on the standalone basis, I should say. Back when I started in the business in the 90s, there was, hundreds of companies that sold long-term care. And so back then, if somebody wanted something, they could get it, they could qualify, they could get something affordable. It's not so much the case today. Like, it's tough to get a standalone long-term care plan. And especially if you have anything going on with your health. There's a lot of underwriting involved, typically family history questionnaires, et cetera, and things of this nature. And so many times those people that are most aware of needing it are either, not able to qualify or priced out of a product, right? And so that's kind of problematic. And that's one of the good things about the life with long-term care hybrid products, is that, typically at the group level, you can get a pretty high level of guaranteed issue, so we can help everybody, right? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Let's change gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about long-term care legislation. Probably most of you on this call are at least, a little aware that there's, a lot of buzz going on about this, and a little activity going on about this around the country. And so, a little bit of a review. So Washington State, a couple of years ago, created the nation's first state-run long-term care plan, and it's basically funded via a payroll tax on the workers of the state of Washington, workers in the state of Washington. And it was really created to take pressure off of their Medicaid system. And so I think we all know this, but what happens is people go through long-term care, exhaust their assets, and then they end up on Medicaid. And so long-term care has become one of the biggest drains on states' Medicaid systems. And so, states are trying to figure out how do they take the pressure off the Medicaid system. And so Washington State kind of took the first crack at this. And their plan was to have a payroll tax that was essentially 0.58% on all, state employees and their wages. And people were to become eligible for that benefit in January of 2025. And it's a very minimal benefit. Okay. It's a $100 a day benefit with a lifetime maximum of $36,500. So we, just took a look at what costs look like, right? And so this is a drop in the bucket when it comes to, long-term care costs overall. Now, what they did in the state of Washington was they allowed people to opt out of the tax if they could demonstrate that they had an individual long-term care plan in place. And of course, there was a flood of people that wanted to do that, and a flood of companies back in 2021 that were, bringing a product to their employees that would allow the employees to have the opportunity to opt out of the tax. And we helped a lot of organizations do that. And there was a lot of reasons why people would want to opt out of the tax, right? Like, they wanted to control the dollars. They wanted to choose a benefit that was more significant than $36,500. They wanted to cover their spouse. They wanted to choose a plan that they could use even if they moved out of the state of Washington, because with the state of Washington plan, if you leave the state, you don't have access to it. So there was a lot of reasons why people wanted to opt out and choose their own coverage, and many employees did just that. Now, ultimately, what happened in the state of Washington is that late December of 2021, the governor stepped in and delayed the implementation of the tax by 18 months. The thought process was that they were going to fix some of the issues that people thought existed with the state-run plan. The end result was that 18 months went by. The tax started in July 1st of 2023, so just a few months ago. and none of the perceived negatives were addressed. Okay. And so those perceived negatives, include the fact that there's no additional opt-out period. Okay. So people had to have their individual coverage in place by November 1st of 2021 and file their exemption by the end of 2022, or they have to pay the tax. So if I'm a new worker in the state of Washington, I just graduate from college or I move into the state and get a job, guess what? I'm paying the tax. Even if I happen to have long-term care, I'm still paying the tax. Um, and there's also still no ability to use the benefit if I move or live outside of the state of Washington. So think about that. I could live or work in the state of Washington for 20 or 30 years and then retire to California, Arizona, Florida, wherever, and then need long-term care services. Well, guess what? I can't access the state benefit I paid into for many years because I'm no longer a state of Washington resident. Okay, so those problems still all exist. They didn't fix any of that. Now, a couple of updates in the state of Washington. They may allow bills to amend the law in this upcoming year, and they are having, some meetings about this. The state Senate Republicans have drafted legislation to make the program optional, and that's what Initiative 2124 is that legislation. It has been filed. There hasn't been a vote or anything of that nature. Personally, because of the makeup in the state of Washington, like my opinion, the makeup of the law-making body in the state of Washington, I personally don't think that it's going to pass to make it an optional program. And if you think about it, once states put taxes into play, very rarely are they, rolled back. So I don't think that anything's going to change there. But Republicans there are trying to make a change. So who knows whether that'll happen or not. We don't really have any way to predict. Couple of other state updates. So Pennsylvania, they reintroduced legislation because they've introduced it twice now. That's very, very similar to the state of Washington legislation, almost exactly the same. It has not been scheduled in committee, and it's probably unlikely to pass in Washington with the way the lawmaking body is set up there currently. Political makeup of that. So the bill will carry over to 2024. Maybe it'll get to a vote next year. Maybe it won't. Really no way to predict. But certainly there's been conversation about it in Pennsylvania. And this has certainly led to conversation for us with our broker partners and with their clients. So companies are aware of this and companies are talking about this. So if you have clients in the state of Washington, or I'm sorry, in the state of Pennsylvania, certainly something to be aware of. So here's an interesting state, New York, right? So New York, they introduced legislation back in 2022. It never got to a vote. It was not reintroduced in 2023. But what has happened is the governor of the state of New York has created a master plan for aging council. And that master plan for aging council has been meeting, and they're set to deliver a roadmap for the master plan by early next year. And part of that roadmap is likely to include a plan for a state-run long-term care plan. Okay, and again, we don't know exactly what that'll look like. We don't know, when if it'll get to a vote, if it'll pass, whatever the case may be. But certainly New York does have a lawmaking body that's probably more friendly to this than other states. And so New York is likely one of the states that something would happen in over the next couple of years. Again, what that ultimately looks like, who knows? It could be similar to the state of Washington. It could be drastically different from the state of Washington. Couple of other states, Minnesota, they introduced legislation back in 2021. No action was taken. Now, the Department of Health Services Aging Division has funded a study in Minnesota that is going to identify options for increasing long-term care financing services and support. Okay, that study was expected to be delivered and at the end of November. Haven't heard anything, since then. So who knows what that study, delivered. But their Department of Health Services could begin drafting legislation for a 2024 legislative session. So again, it remains to be seen what exactly will happen in Minnesota, but definitely is a conversation that's being had there. Now, here's probably the most interesting state, California. California has been the state that's taken the most pragmatic approach to this. And so, excuse me, in California, they created a task force back in, I think, 2019. And that task force um, delivered a feasibility report back in 2022. And this past year, over 2023, um, the 5 proposed plans in the state of California, that task force delivered 5 proposed plans. They have been going through an actuarial review, okay? And that review is due by the end of this year. And um, that task force, could the report could influence the task force design options and things of that nature. So they may tweak from there. But it's important to know that that task force is strictly in an advisory capacity. They don't create legislation. They're just really delivering a report to the legislative body, who from there may draft legislation to be voted on in the state of California. Now, again, there's been a lot of conversation. They have taken a pragmatic approach. My opinion is that California is one of the states that's most likely to act on this next. Now, what next means remains to be seen. Could that be in 2024? Will it be sometime down the road? None of us really know. But I can tell you that they're far enough down the road that, like I said, they've looked at 5 proposed plans. And that's what the actuarial study is of right now, as I previously said. And those 5 proposed plans, really vary. This is just a really short little snapshot of the 5 proposed plans. There's many, many, many other details to it than just this. But you can see that they range from being, similar to the state of Washington, maybe in option 1, design 1, to being, much more robust in option 5. Some of these proposed plans include both an employee and an employer tax. Some of them allow for the opt-out for people that have coverage. Some of them don't. Some of them cover the entire population. Some of them only cover the population over the age of 65. And so a lot of different, formats to this. And so who knows exactly what'll shake out in the state of California. But again, I think that they're probably one of the states that is most likely to act, sooner rather than later. So we'll see what happens in the state of California. Now, Colorado has also looked at this. They had a June 14th meeting where they brought in the people from Washington State and the California task force. That meeting received positive reaction from their commission. They've also had some conversations with Minnesota about what they're considering. So again, it's on the docket, so to speak, in California, or it's at least it's a conversation in Colorado. But again, we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. And then Massachusetts, they've introduced or they've created a commission similar to California. They have also approved funds to have an actuarial study conducted to review programs and financing options. So again, moving down the path, but again, no solid action as of yet. So that's a review of some of the different states that are considering, options and kind of where they stand. Now, I did want to talk about one thing. Some of the states have had conversations about retroactive opt-out. In fact, in the California proposed plans, some of those plans have, messaging or language about this. I think it's been talked about in New York as well. And what the retroactive opt-out means is that in order for people to be eligible for the opt-out, people would be required to have coverage in place prior to legislation passing. Maybe actually all the way prior to the beginning of the year that legislation passes. Now, again, none of us know what's actually going to pass, right? Or what's going to be presented to be voted on. So it doesn't mean that anything's going to pass with a retroactive opt-out, but it could. And so it's just something to make, clients aware of, that it is a possibility. It has been, discussed. But again, none of us know exactly what that's going to look like, whether it's going to pass that way, whether it even be a part of the bill, who knows. But something to just be aware of. So legislation alone, I know a lot of times people talk about legislation, and that's the driving force for this conversation many times. But the reality is your clients should be thinking about this anyway, whether they're in a state that's considering legislation or not. it still remains that, like we said in the beginning, it's probably the most underserved, under prepared for financial need of our population as a whole, right? And so, to depend on legislation would be a mistake. And even if you look at like Washington, right? So in the state of Washington, the median cost of a private room in a nursing home is about $10,500. Meanwhile, their benefit there, the state-run benefit is approximately, $100 a day or $3,000 a month, and only for 1 year, right? So it's not really, meant to prepare someone for the possibility of long-term care. Again, it's more about taking the pressure off the state Medicaid system, right? And it's just a drop in the bucket. So it's important to let your clients know that, even if legislation does pass in their state, it's not going to be the solution for long-term care. It's really going to be a combination of things, right? It's going to be people being prepared by being prepared for retirement in general, but also being prepared to protect that retirement savings through having, long-term care, private insurance, right? And then maybe a state-run program is just on top of that. So, guys, we'll spend our last few minutes talking about these life with long-term care hybrid products. And I think most of you are probably familiar with these, but, they're just a combination of life insurance and long-term care, together. It's a combination of, life insurance and long-term care all put together in one product. And there's various carriers that have this type of products with different structure. So, this is just kind of a general snapshot of what structure looks like. It has a death benefit, top left-hand corner. It has a terminal illness benefit, top right-hand corner, similar to how VTL works, where it advances up to 75% of the death benefit if somebody's diagnosed with a terminal illness. And then bottom right-hand corner, it has a living benefit or a long-term care rider that will advance some percentage of the death benefit. This specific example says 4%. Some of the carriers may be 6%, some may be 2%, but it is, generally, in that range. And it's going to advance that percentage of the death benefit for some amount of time, right? In this specific example, we say 25 months. And then typically with most product structures, what happens is after that initial time period is exhausted and someone's still receiving long-term care treatment, it then triggers the left-hand bottom corner an extension of benefits, which then typically extends or doubles the long-term care benefit. And I'll give you a kind of a real numbers example next. And then typically there's even still a death benefit paid, even if they have, exhausted the long-term care benefit as well. Product structure really depends on the carrier, the state that the company's site is in, their choice. There's, some other options there to consider. And then just so you know, typically the trigger for benefits on these life hybrid products is similar to the trigger on long-term care in general, right? It's typically the inability to perform 2 or more of the 6 activities of daily living or severe cognitive impairment, right? And so that's typically your trigger for benefits. Now, for those of you that aren't real familiar with this product structure, this might be helpful for you. So let's say I'm an employee of one of your clients and I choose a $100,000, policy. And let's just say I pass away and I never need long-term care. I have a heart attack on the golf course and I pass away. Well, it's going to work like any other life product would, and it's going to pay my beneficiaries my death benefit, which in this case would be $100,000. If I'm diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's going to advance me 75%, or in this case, $75,000, with the remaining $25,000 to be paid to my beneficiary at time of passing. And then bottom right-hand corner, my long-term care benefit, it's going to, if I'm in a long-term care situation, it's going to advance 4%, or in this case, $4,000 per month for up to 25 months. After 25 months, it's going to extend that $4,000 per month for another 25 months. And then with most product structures, even if I pass away after exhausting all of that, it's still going to pay my beneficiaries my full death benefit, which in this case would be $100,000. So you can see that, in a worst case scenario, I call it worst case, where I go through 50 months of long-term care and then pass away, the total benefit paid on a $100,000 life plan would be $200,000 in long-term care and a $100,000 death benefit, or in this case, $300,000. Okay. Now you may be thinking, well, hey, $4,000 a month isn't enough. You showed me the cost earlier, and you're right. It may not be. So people can choose more than 100,000. They can take 200,000. They can, with some of the carriers, they can take up to $500,000 in coverage, right? And so I just use 100,000 as a round number, so you get a kind of a round number example of how it works. I know we're right up on time, so we'll wrap up and then answer a few questions. So these hybrid products, if you haven't used them in the past, they're super appealing at the employee level. And I think the big reason is because people know they're paying for something that one way or the other, they're going to get a benefit out of, or their family's going to get a benefit out of, right? Versus if I just buy standalone long-term care and I pass away and never need long-term care, I've paid for something that I didn't really ever receive a benefit from. With the life hybrid products, one way or the other, either because I passed away or because I need long-term care, one way or the other, there's a benefit paid. The other thing is that it's guaranteed acceptance underwriting. All of your clients would get a really high level of guaranteed issue without having to answer any health questions or anything of that nature. If they're at work, they can get a high level of coverage. And again, the premiums are usually level, meaning people aren't going to get hit with rate increases as time goes on. They're typically whole life or universal life chassis products, so they are accumulating cash value over time. And then the next bullet point I think is real important. It's an indemnity product, not a reimbursement product. So let's say, for example, I'm receiving care in my own home and my spouse is providing the majority of my care, but once a week, I have a certified caregiver come in to give my spouse a break. And maybe that costs me $250 a week or $1,000 a month. But let's say my benefit is like in the example I showed you, let's say it's $4,000 a month. I'm still going to receive the full $4,000 a month, even though my cost of care is only $1,000 a month. That's what I mean by an indemnity product. And again, it also does have the potential to pay claims during informal care. Like in that example I just gave, my spouse would be considered an informal caregiver. And so these plans do cover that type of scenario, right? And they're all portable. So people can take them state to state, job to job, into retirement, etc. Okay. So typically, you're getting, about $150,000 of guaranteed issue, maybe a little less than that, maybe a little more than that, depending on the size group and the carrier and that type of thing. But that's pretty typical. And then this is just kind of an example of the type of participation we get. We typically get 25 to 40% participation, depending upon, the group. But you can see whether it's blue collar or white collar, that's pretty typical of the type of participation we're getting. And so that you can kind of understand what comp looks like, and then we'll wrap this up. I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's a 350 person trucking company. We did, 104 enrolled, 171,000 in premium. Our broker partner received about $68,000 in comp from that. Defense technology firm with 650 people, 151 enrolled, 212,000 in premium, 84 or almost 85,000 in comp to our broker partner. 400-person financial services firm, 75 enrolled, 220,000 in premium, 88,000 in comp to our broker partner. And then even some smaller ones, 75-person HVAC company, 27 enrolled, 33,000 in premium, 13,000 in comp to our broker partner. And even a small 23-person engineering firm, 16,000 in comp and 6,300 in premium to our broker partner. And even in schools, private school, 90 employees, 27 enrolled, 48,000 in premium, almost 20,000 in comp to our broker partner. And here's a telecommunications firm, 272,000 in comp and 110,000 in premium to our broker partner. So, across the board, pretty good participation in that type of thing. Chelsea, I know we're up on time, so I'm going to pause there and just see if there's any questions in chat, or give people a chance to put questions in chat.
We currently do not have any questions in the chat as of right now.
Feel free to enter questions into chat now, and I'll answer them as best I can. Does anyone have any questions? While you're doing that, I'm just going to show you some of the examples of the type of communications we use. That's a big part of this, is the employee engagement strategy, right? And so, Transamerica is one of the carriers we work with. Trustmark is another one. Allstate is another one. And you can see, like, we have these, emails that go out to employees that help engage them. They also get reminder emails that have facts about long-term care in it that really helps drive them to the education. They get quote examples that go out to them as well. So anyway, if any of you are interested in looking at this for your clients, feel free to reach out to us and we can kind of help you through that process. This is what we do every day. Pretty simple process. We just need a census with date of birth, date of hire, zip code, gender, job title, and we can get started on gathering options for you. Any questions in chat, Chelsea?
We have one question. What is your enrollment process? Is it your EEs doing this?
Is it my employees doing this? Is that what they're asking? By EEs? Is our employees doing this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what is our enrollment process? So number one, like our process starts long before enrollment starts, right? And so a big part of having success with this type of product is the employee engagement and education process, right? Because most people don't understand long-term care. They don't know what a life hybrid product is, right? So there's a lot of education that goes into making this successful. So typically our process starts about 3 weeks prior to enrollment starting with education starting, right? And that education consists of a series of employees' emails, can be text messages, voicemail messages, video clips, live and recorded webinars that employees can watch and attend, right? So if you think about it, people have to get education in a lot of different ways in today's world. Some people will sit through a half-hour webinar. Other people have to get a 30 to 60 second, commercial clip, right? And so we give them, bite-sized as well as the full, product all at the same time, and they can choose the way they want education. Throughout that process, they can also click a link and schedule a call with one of our benefit education specialists. Those people, those benefit education specialists, are W-2 employees of the Voluntary Benefits Shop. They're salaried employees. So they are, there to answer questions, help review the plans, talk to the spouse, give them quotes, help them enroll, whatever that particular scheduled employee needs. In addition, if an employee doesn't want to talk to anybody, that's fine too. They can click a link, go right into our platform, and they can self-enroll as well. We do encourage people to schedule and ask questions, just because a lot of times they do want to involve their spouse and that type of thing. And so people do have the ability to do that. But people also go in and self-enroll as well. Typically, the enrollment process, the actual enrollment dates where the platform is open and the calls happen, is typically a 2-week process. Now it can be longer for larger groups. Just did an organization with about 12,000 employees, and theirs was actually a month long, right? And so depending on the size, it can be longer, but typically a group does about 2 weeks of enrollment with about 3 weeks of education prior to enrollment starting. And then post enrollment, we're auditing everything and then providing the files back to the carrier, and then payroll files back to the client, et cetera, and that type of thing. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to enter it into chat. Chelsea, I did see a question, like, does the platform integrate with UKG?
Correct.
Okay. So if it depends on what you mean by integrate, right? And so the best way to have it work with UKG is to do what's called an SSO connection, a single sign-on connection, where an employee would still be in UKG and as they went through the enrollment process. And then when they got to this benefit, it actually would take them over to the Solarix platform where they could elect or decline coverage. Now, there's some setup that has to be done to make that happen, obviously. And generally, the client and UKG have to be involved. If the client doesn't want to have that much interaction in terms of setup, there's another way to do it where we just create a payroll file that feeds back to UKG to populate it from a payroll deduction perspective, and that works as well. I'd say that the majority of the clients that have UKG or ADP or something of that nature, they do it the second way, the latter way, where it's just a payroll file back and forth. I'd say that that's probably about what 70% do, and about 30% take the SSO route, the single sign-on route. But either way, it can integrate. It just depends on which route the client wants to go. Any other questions?
That looks to be the final question in the chat.
Guys, I'll pause and just see if anybody has any other questions that they want to add. In addition, I'll put my contact information back up there. If you have any clients maybe you want to ask a specific, question about, or, reach out to, or if you just want to schedule a call to talk about how you can incorporate this into your strategy for 2024, feel free, to reach out to me and we can schedule a call to kind of talk specifics. We have a lot of brokers that we work with that really, we've put together a very structured process to allow them to use this to create a very significant revenue stream, for their agency. And a big part of it is, creating a process for their teams to work with us. And so if that's what you're looking for, reach out to me and we can talk through that. Chelsea, any other questions in chat?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. I will hold on just for a second to see if anybody wants to enter anything into chat. But again, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for taking some time out, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions or you want to talk about anything specifically.